And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Silvana Mastella. I'm the CEO of Trust IT and the Stan ICT 2023 coordinator. That you see in front of you, you should see a slide with the 7th Walk and Talk webinar. This time it's on women in ICT standards. We're absolutely delighted to have such a fantastic group of wonderful women speaking for the next hour and a half. And I'm just going to go through some quick slides very quickly to show you what we have in store. What we wanted to do is, the key objective of this webinar was to clearly show this growing bond of how many women were working in ICT standards. It all began with the fellowship program that we have under Stan ICT, where we fund a series of experts with a series of open calls. Open call at the moment, we'll talk about that in a moment. And we wanted to try and increase this number of the funded experts of females, because we know there are a lot of you out there. And in fact, thanks to this first webinar, we've received tons of personal messages saying, can I be in your next one? Can I be in your next one? So this will be the first of a series of women in ICT standards. And we're so thrilled about this. So 65% of the participants in today's call are females, which is also wonderful. What we want to do is raise awareness of the initiative amongst women engaged in ICT standardization. We want to showcase the foundational role that women play in ICT. We want to see in some of the presentations we're going to hear today, where we have women playing a major role as conveners or chairs of working groups and technical committees in SDOs. And we want to try and see how women in ICT standards actually fit the different chapters of the ICT rolling plan on standardization. And we do know that the 2022 edition is just being finalized and it will be ready very soon. So this is the key areas that we want to try and demonstrate, and we certainly hope we will achieve that in these different series. So the lineup of our females you can see here. We're absolutely delighted to also welcome Helen Kopman from the European Commission, Acting Head of Unit of the Digital Innovation and Blockchain Unit at DG Connect. I will be moderating the session today, and then we will have Fiona Delaney, CEO at Origin Chain Networks and the European Observatory of ICT Standardization Blockchain Technical Working Group Chair, Sabine Jennings, Senior Standards Compliance Program Manager at IBM, Mariana, and I always get the surname wrong, apologies, Marikova, IEC Technical Officer and Women in Standards Board Member. Then we have Maria Ines Robles, IETF role, co-chair and Stan ICT 2023 fellow. Jackie Taylor, CEO at Flying Binary, convener at JTC1 and vice chair TC 465. And finally, Suno Wood, chair of ETSI TCE Health. So just some housekeeping. The webinar will be recorded and will be made available for those of you who are unable to be here with us now. The interactive chat is available by default. You'll see we have questions and answers, and we also have the chat. So please feel free to include that. And put in your question in the dedicated Q&A. And please follow the chat and our social media channels to receive updates around Stan ICT. So you will be coming back to me in a moment. And with that, I would like to pass the floor, the opening address to Helen Kopman. Helen, are you with us? Okay, let's give a couple of more minutes indeed for Helen to join us so I can move on and complete the summary slides for Stan ICT. I talked about the open calls, that we're currently on number 6. There will be 10 in total. Stan ICT concludes in August 2023, so you will have enough time to put in your bid if you haven't already. We wanted to provide a quick overview of the results from calls 1 to 4, where you see the different targeted topics, you see which SDOs, the fellows who are our successful applicants, actually introduce their ICT standard application. And then we've given an overview also of the organization type. Clearly, so our gender needs to improve. And this is one of the reasons why we're holding these webinars, as I mentioned earlier. So if you do have an idea, you're working on ICT standards, you want to get support to help you in your activities, please apply. And you do have this closing date of the 14th of February. If you're not lucky on this round, don't worry, there will be other calls that you're able to support your application to. What we do produce is then a series of impact reports that go in parallel with our fellows who receive funding. And we like to be able to highlight what the actual impact has been of the applications that come in. And you can see here that we already have the results from our first and our second open call. And these are all available via Zenodo, and they're getting an extremely relevant amount of downloads. So it's obviously an area that people are interested in reading. A reminder of our IOS, which is our EU Observatory for ICT Standardization, where we upload all the most relevant standards. And what's good at the moment is that we're able to then map the efforts that are going on in our technical working groups, which are, I'll move to the next slide immediately, in different thematic areas. So we already have the landscape reports on AI, on smart cities. Trusted information will be issued very shortly. And then in the pipeline, we have also the technical working group landscapes on ontologies and standards, as well as blockchain, edge, cloud. And what we want to do is ensure that these timely and most updated standards are then seamlessly transferred into our IOS. So we know that we have the most updated and that it's an inclusive process. And so I'm happy that this is one of our objectives and we're achieving that for 2022. And with that, here's my final slide. You will have the details. If you don't follow us already, please do. And make sure you do get in touch with us if you'd like to apply for any of the calls. If you'd like to come on to our second Women in ICT Standards, please drop us a line there too. And again, I want to repeat the statistic of our participants today is over 65% are females. Not only do we have a full female panel, but our participants too. And it would be interesting to know also from our male participants, your interest also in these endeavors. And with that, I'd like to stop now, and I can see Helen here, which is great. And I'd like to pass the floor to an opening address to Helen Kopman, who's acting head of unit of the Digital Innovation and Blockchain Unit at DG Connect. Thank you very much, Helen, for joining us and taking time out. I know you have an incredibly strenuous schedule today. Over to you, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siobhan.
Helen, you're actually muted. You have to switch on your mic.
Okay.
Helen,
all right,
okay.
now you can hear me, I guess.
Yes, hear you loud and clear now. Perfect, Helen, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Silvana, and thank you for inviting me to come here and give you a cheer, basically, because I think it's a fantastic initiative that you have taken under Stand ICT project, which is a European Commission standardization that already has produced a wealth of results, as you have seen in the presentation, and now also supporting the area of improving and increasing the number of women that are active in ICT standardization in particular. And this is very warm to my heart. It's something that we have been working on a lot in the Commission to try to improve skills in ICT in general, a skills gap, and that this also comes very much from the fact that there are quite a few women that are pursuing ICT as a career in terms of academic specialized studies. But I mean, as you see here, we are all women panel, and we're going to focus on this topic. It is possible. You just have to find them. And I think that one thing that we could think about is that it's not only ICT. You don't need to have been studying ICT in particular as academic to be able to go into this field. I think there's a lot more skills and talents to be found also outside the ICT specialized areas, because if you look at tertiary studies in Europe, the majority are actually women coming out of those, and we need a lot more of other type of skills into the ICT area, and I think in particular standardization, to get the right technologies looked at from different angles, from all kinds of skills and interests and talents. And I think here we have an opportunity to increase the pool of women actually active in this area. This is my just personal take. I'm sure that you are the expert, and you will have a great discussion on how, other ideas on how this could be addressed. And I'm just so honored to be able to be here with you today, and I hope you have a fantastic meeting. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Helen. Thank you so much for joining and giving us this very timely opening address. And it's true what you say. The whole area of non-ICT just is crucial also. And I think that's something we should also tap into maybe in the future Women in Standards webinar too. Why not? So without further ado, I'm going to thank Helen very much and go into our first panelist speaker, who is Fiona Delaney. In fact, I will stop sharing now, Fiona, to give you a chance to put up your slides, and which we can see. That's great, perfect. And now the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Fiona.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Silvana and Helen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today, sharing with you some insights from my own experiences with standards development and open contributions. So I'm a software engineer myself, and I have my own company. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But through a sort of show and tell, I think what I'd like to share with the audience today is how getting involved in standards development and emerging standards development can benefit you in your progress, either as an academic researcher or as leading a company in industry. And it enhances communication across different knowledge domains and knowledge boundaries. And that's absolutely what I have been involved in the development of emerging blockchain standards, which is itself a kind of foundational technology which facilitates direct marketplace intervention through various different schemes and features, including tokenization. I'm not going to get too much into that part of it right now, but I will be talking about how knowledge sharing and knowledge exchange across international boundaries can really help us cooperate in the marketplace, but also affect and demonstrate aspects of the social contract, which I know that many of the other speakers here today will be talking about things like the Green Deal, how to affect climate action and climate change, and how to, I guess, bring everybody on board. So that's very much an area that I've been involved in, and that's the perspective I'll be sharing today. It has been pointed out that my slides are quite dense, so I'm not going to talk through them all. They will be available afterwards, so anybody can pick through them. I'm just going to give you some highlights. On the left here, you can see some of the open standards I've been involved in developing. There are three main areas that I've been involved in. Innovation management, under the direction of Alice de Casanova, who's another woman in standards who I could recommend to be involved here. So the Series 5000 are a really important set of innovation management standards, which are really, really useful when we're working with emerging technologies. So anybody in blockchain, AI, or cloud and edge, those are really useful tools. for moving into industry and marketplaces. Another area is obviously blockchain and DLT, and I have been delighted to cooperate quite closely with Caroline Thomas from BSI, Xiaodan Tang from SEC, Wenting Chang, Chris Wang, a whole bunch of other people, and I'll be referencing later on Galia Kondova, who's another Stand ICT fellow, who has received funding through Stand ICT for her contributions to some of the work that I've been doing as well. There's a whole bunch of other people, but I would like to mention Nina Dukashab from UNCFACT and also Wee Ding from IEEE, who is leading a blockchain and agriculture frameworks. So there's a whole bunch of women there that, along with the men, we've been charging ahead to cooperate. So very quickly, I'll move on to, I am the co-founder and CEO of Origin Chain Networks, and we are looking to provide or build a future of food that we can trust. Very quickly, the problem that we see is that there's gaps in the origin story of food. We're going to use software to solve it. Here we have a carbon footprint analysis, and we can see at the different layers or different parts of the value chain, from the farm side to the logistics side to end-of-life waste management. There's a lot of information and a lot of process that happens that if we want to take a holistic view of the value chain, we need some kind of digital system, digital twin process, or some kind of overview that allows us all, from producer to consumer, to contribute to the digital provenance of food. So we use blockchain technology to provide that kind of solution. One of the iterations of our service we contributed to the ISO DLT use case repository was an open source version of our AgriTrust platform, which is called Universal Farm Compliance. And we wrote that as a way of being able to share insights into the service that we commercially provide without losing, I guess, some of the secrets that we have behind the scenes. So this was our way of open sourcing our own knowledge base and being able to, I guess, advocate for the interface, enhanced interfaces between public and private sector, where particularly when we see the direction that the European Commission is taking with blockchain services, that it is about providing citizens with a platform for greater transparency, visibility and participation. So in industry terms, if you're thinking about using blockchain, this is obviously the Lean model canvas. There are a few things that you should bear in mind. Your problem should be multi-party. The existing alternatives probably need to be in need of transformation. And in terms of segmenting your customer, there you have a hint as to who might be involved in your consortia and how you might approach resolving governance. Early adopters, as always, are about market validation. So this is just an insight into if you want to use existing tools for startups and industry and that kind of thing, a particularly decentralized approach would privilege these different ideas here. Blockchain, what is it? This is my favorite, most accessible definition, and it comes from a German researcher. So it offers increased value for partners cooperating in a decentral network by providing data and process integrity, automation potential, and enabling the transparent transfer of values and rights. So forget about NFTs, forget about cryptocurrency. This is essentially what blockchain can offer you in your business and us in Europe in terms of citizen participating in public administration. Back to the food industry then. Where are, or how can we classify or categorize agri-food contexts where blockchains are deployed? And this is something that I put together for a technical report called 6039, which is looking at subject and object identifiers for use in blockchain system design. And it was very much an industry-led initiative coming out of NEN, which is the Dutch Standards Authority, and it's led by Gerard Hartzink. So the contexts that we can identify are around corporate social responsibility schemes, traceability optimization, food integrity and fraud countermeasures, decentralized finance, of course. And then the technical part of me is kind of interested in is industry and agriculture 4.0 and what it can afford bioeconomies and economies of circular economies and cascading economies. So there's a whole wealth of processes and opportunities that we can start to look at there. This is currently I'm really focusing on this. TR6277, which is led by my Chinese colleague Shedan Tang, a data flow model for blockchain and DLT use cases. And what we have found in WG6, which is the use case part of the ISO TC307 blockchain group, is that by introducing a use case methodology based on information coming from the marketplace, that we are able to compare and contrast various different approaches to solving some of these common problems. The foundation of this study here is that we recognize that 20th century economics, we're looking at quantifying input and output relationships between industry sectors. And in the 21st century, the key is to account for the value of information. And blockchain technology and blockchain systems and platforms can help us there, can help us experiment there. These are two case studies, Galia Kondova's Pharma Ledger report, which is about information leaflets and ensuring that the correct information is being shared with citizens over time. Very interesting on-chain and off-chain proposition for assuring quality data and data integrity. And the other case study is our own from Origin Chain Networks, which is about Earth observation resources in habitat classification in sustainable food. So these are two case studies that we will be contributing to this data flow model and being able to compare and contrast different approaches in a useful way. So anybody can reach out to me if you have an interesting case study that you would like to contribute. I'm all ears. That would be very much appreciated. And the last thing I'm going to say, I'm also the chairperson of Blockchain Ireland Startups Group, and we have a podcast series. And Blockchain Ireland is currently authoring a national strategy for blockchain that we're sharing with public administration. And one of the case studies that we worked up was this blockchain and bioeconomy business use case. And I'm going to leave it here, but you can see, you might not be able to recognize, but we have used essentially emerging standards in blockchain as part of this description of the state of the art. And that is being used to bolster and enlighten actors or decision takers in this innovation space. So there's a lot of material there. That's me, over and out. I hope, Silvana, I have kept to my time frame okay. I understand we'll be doing questions later, so I welcome any questions that anybody has. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Very clear to the point, Helen. I think we're in time, on time. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, I thought I'd been looked at, sorry. Whilst Sabine prepares her presentation coming up next, I do want to come back to you, Fiona, you don't need to show the slides, but interestingly, obviously, under clearly Horizon Europe and Digital Europe program, lots of new programs being funded by the Commission. And what we'd like to be able to do also as part of Standardized ICT is to connect how some relevant research and innovation projects are clearly implementing standards as part of their day-to-day activity, and looking at what you presented now in your use case. I feel this is very relevant under the cluster 6, which is the food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture and environment, for those of you who aren't familiar with this specific cluster under Horizon Europe. But if what we want to be able to do is to actually show and demonstrate the benefits and describe them more from a company point of view, from a researcher, and to actually show, well, here was a funded project, or even if it isn't, but in the case of a funded project, this is the actual benefit. And in your use case, could you consider, I definitely maybe want to pull out a proposal under Horizon Europe that implements these, and I can build a consortium around these ideas. So It's a bit of an open question, Fiona, but that's what came to my mind when I looked at your slides.
Yeah, so obviously we, in my company, we're quite involved in a number of, they're currently open applications, so I can't really talk about some of that. But I've also been invited, so they will be under the Farm to Fork clusters, there's blockchain, there's food traceability, there's, even, I mean, it's so obvious to me that blockchain is a foundational infrastructure for supporting research. So no matter what kind of research it is, because consortia in these funding propositions, you're setting up a governance model. It's so unlikely that it seems to me, and this is my opinion, that even though we're all coming out of lockdowns and that kind of thing, I think our work practices are changing a lot. And I think that has been a good thing, particularly for women or for particularly people who are less mobile. So it's a great thing, and it's an inclusive thing that we have these now hybrid options. So online governance structures are really, really important and key. So it's not, so obviously in my company, I'm talking about farm to fork, value chain, transparency. Also, these are around business governance models, but we can see that infrastructure also working in the context of research. And I would definitely encourage those many different aspects. And if there's a role for Stand ICT there, I would definitely suggest looking at the use case methodology and describing those research projects according to that, makes them more shareable and more discoverable in either the Sense Analytic repository or the ISO repository. The last thing I would say is that it's funny, I don't know what role Stand ICT could take in an application. That's maybe something for you to look at. I know that the policy section sometimes takes quite an active role. For all those research applications, impact is a really important part. And if Stand ICT can take a further role there, there's probably, that would be very welcome. Speaking as a consortium member of those kind of horizon applications. So there's probably a role there as well.
That's clear, Fiona. Thank you very much for that reply. I think Stand ICT can certainly support in the fact that we're putting on, we're visibly showing before March of this year, a dedicated section on success stories and use cases. So I think for starters, we'll take, if you let us, your examples already and some from the other speakers too. So we can already showcase this. I don't think Stand ICT can play a role in any potential consortium. Obviously, it's not a legal entity, it's because it's a project. But what you're describing is certainly, I think, an opportunity for your startup and your other potential partners to take these use cases and create a consortium out of it if you have the energy to do it.
Yeah. The last thing I would say, if it's okay to just add one thing, that reference I made to Galia Kondova's work, that was, Pharma Ledger was, as far as I'm aware, a European funded project.
Yes, okay, perfect.
Yeah, and there are a few others. There's a Poseidon project, and through work of the policy section, there was these roundtable discussions, verticals and horizontals of blockchain, where they were presenting funded European projects that were using blockchain, and we invited all of them to get in touch.
I remember those. They were very well attended, those blockchain sessions. I think that's something Stand ICT needs to work on more this year, pulling out the results from these projects and giving them a bit more visibility. I'd like us to have that as an objective. Wonderful, Fiona. Thank you so much for that presentation. Now over to Sabine Janning. Hi, Sabine. How are you doing?
Hi, fine. Thanks. You?
Very well, thank you. So I'll leave you the floor, and we're bang on time.
Okay, thanks, Silvana, so I share my screen. Yes, you can see my screen, so
all good,
everything
Sabine,
is
yes.
all right. Okay. Yes, a warm welcome from my side. I'm working for IBM on especially on hardware standardization and compliance. And I would like to share today with you, yes, my work and some views on the European new legislation framework and on, of course, on harmonized standards. So what could you expect in the next 10 minutes? I would give you some European objectives on new legislation framework and standardization. And then a short introduction on my topics, product safety and EMC standardization and why it matters. And then I would like to explain a little bit the, the new legislation framework and the draft AI Act. And yes, of course, at the end, coming to my personal outlook for standardization. So for some of you, might be a repetition, but how it works, why are new legislation framework and standardization are closed together. Think of the single market where we are all working, and at the end is the market access for our products. And in between is the new legislation framework. And the objective is to ensure, of course, free movement of goods, the protection and the compliance of products, but also the competitiveness and the fair market, and also the fair market access. How is it done? Yes, on one side, you have the EU directives and regulations with the determination of the essential requirements, of course. And on the other side, you have the harmonized standards, which fulfill the essential requirements. And due to the European standardization regulation 1025 up to from 2012, the European Commission gives us the mandates or the requests to Senelec and of course also to ETSI. And if the standards are accepted by the European Commission, then they will be cited in the official journal of the Union and could be used by all stakeholders. So the conclusion is here, the NLF with harmonized standards is working well for decades. So I'm working more on hardware at this time, and especially here for product safety and electromagnetic compatibility. And you could say safety and EMC standards are old-fashioned, but they are, of course, on maintenance to be updated, adjusted to EU objectives, and of course, reacting on new technologies. And therefore I'm contributing to standards via the German standardization body DKI, and of course, then in Senelec. And also I'm using on electromagnetic compatibility the CISPA liaison from ECMA. And ECMA is an industry association where I'm leading a group on EMC from manufacturers manufacturing ICTs. Okay. Concerning new technologies, for example, in product safety, there is a development of the hazard-based standard, an example, which has a hazard-based approach, means that we take a look on the potentially hazards coming up. Yes, and there I'm working, contributing also in Senelec TC108X. So using these standards for ICT hardware is the basis or the infrastructure, of course, for cloud, for Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. And you cannot separate in the future hardware and software in a system anymore. So this is the conclusion for the European Commission to use the new legislation framework for the Draft AI Act. And there I want to talk now on it, because the Draft AI Act is based on the new legislation framework and is based on product safety. And yes, the AI Act stands for proportionality, for innovation, of course, and of course also for technology neutrality, because it must be open for future emerging technologies. The AI Act works with a risk approach. So we are looking at high-risk products. And according to the NLF, we have, of course, there the essential requirements. And I have some listed here. They are given in the AI Act in Article 9 to 15. For example, risk management systems or record keeping or human oversight. But these essential requirements have to be fulfilled by harmonized standards. And these harmonized standards, of course, does not exist at this time. So we have to develop them. And this is started in ISO IEC Joint Technical Committee 1, Subcommittee 42, which stands for Artificial Intelligence. And of course, in the European, as you like, the Mirror Committee, CENELEC, GTC 21, where I'm also delegated by my national body. Yeah. So this is an overview, new legislation framework coming up from hardware to software to the AI Act and using harmonized standards. So I come to my last slide. The outlook, or my personal outlook for standardization, is to develop harmonized standards for artificial intelligence. But don't forget that standardization is innovation, and that standardization is always a consensus of all stakeholders. Do not hesitate to contribute. And keep in mind that the team always has different characters to win. So take the stage to contribute, to orchestrate. And yes, I would say what I've learned during my standardization time, because I'm working there since 2009, you cannot be an expert at all, but all together we make the puzzle. So thanks for your attention, and I'm open for questions.
Wonderful, Sabine. Thank you so much. I don't think we have any specific ones at the moment. Clearly, the new legislative framework is huge, and the whole added value with the harmonized standards, etc. Just very briefly, if you can say in 1 minute, how does it differ to the approach that was taken in the past? You can just say a few words on that.
May you repeat it a little bit more?
So the whole point of the added value of the harmonized standards in the context of the new legislative framework has obviously made
it works very well in the, over decades, and it especially for SMEs, I think, which is the probably promotion for the European Union to work with startups, to work with SMEs. There you can use the harmonized standards very well, and it is very easy to come to the market in the European Union then. And when we think of the fair market, then this is the most important thing. I think we have the single market all over the world. People think European single market is very good. I think, and this is the topic. And then for this stands the new legislation framework, and that's why. I am also promoting the new legislation framework for future technologies and of course for artificial intelligence.
I think I think with that, Sabine, our takeaway should be, we didn't mention this in this morning's presentation, but we have a whole area dedicated to the Standards Academy. And there's a technical working group on this, and Ray Walsh is on this webinar here as well, one of our partners at DCU of Stand ICT. And I think we should probably pick this part up, especially and try and introduce this in effort also for the benefit of SMEs also in the part of our Standards Academy. So we'll come back with you on this subject if we may, Sabine. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. That was very interesting. Next up, we have Maria Ines. Hi, Maria. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you very much. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good.
I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you as well. And you're also one of our fellows too, which is great. But we do have other fellows on the call too, I know. So there, let me pass the floor to you immediately.
Yes, I will share my screen.
Great, Maria.
Can you see it? Can you see my screen?
We can see it now and we can hear you well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for being here. I will talk to you about IoT in the ITF and the ITF itself. So when we talk about Internet of Things, what we refer that everything that can be connected will be connected. What that means, that I have to adapt my internet to different type of networks, devices. For example, if I want to send a temperature value about a small packet that the standard 1815.4. And when I have to send this information through internet, I need to do specific things. Like, for example, I have to adapt my internet protocols, the internet protocol for IoT devices, IPv6. And then I have to do all the aspect of routing. I have to deal all with the aspect of the web transfer, the end user, how they will deliver to the applications, and then all the aspect of securities and the management. And for all this, to ensure interoperability, I need standards. So one of these standards is the ITF. But what is the ITF? The ITF is stands for Internet Engineering Task Force, and it's an open international community composed of operators, researchers, vendors, experts that have a common goal of make the internet work better, but producing internet standards are called RFC, request for comments. And the goal of this RFC is to influence the way that people use, manage the internet. So for example, if we take the TCP/IP stats, we can see that, for example, the first two layers, physical and MAC, are in charge of other SDOs, like for example, IEEE. And then all the internet layer, transport layer, application layers are developed mainly for the ITF. So which is the ITF principles? It's an open process. It's open to every individual. It's a technical competence. The ITF develop technical documents that cover all the aspects about the internet development and architecture. It's based on volunteer core. The ITF has a protocol ownership on the standards. They are responsible for the standards that they develop, and they are open to everyone. And we have a rough consensus and running code mechanism to accept the standards, of course, through voting, and much better if we have code running of our internet solution. So the ITF it has several areas. We have application and real-time areas, general area, operation and management area, security area, internet area, routing area, and transport area. So these are the areas of the ITF. So for example, if we pick up a routing area, every area is divided by the different working groups, and every area is under a director management. So for example, if we pick up one working group, we can see the charter, and then the documents that the group works, then the meetings when they are held that you can attend, the list archive, that all the main work in the ITF is done through mailing list. So you can subscribe through this link, and actually you can see how in graphic way how the documents are interrelated. So for example, these are the documents parts of this, for example, routing area working group. So we can see that the documents are organized in 3 sections. First, related internet draft, then active internet draft, and then at the end, RFCs. So related internet draft are, for example, the draft that individuals submit. For example, I detect that there is an internet problem. So I have a solution, I propose a solution, so I can write a document, submit it into a working group that has this topic as work item. So it's going to appear my name here with the name of the draft. Then when the working group take this document as part of the working group item, became active internet draft, and you can see that that name is changed by ITF. Then when the working group work and conversation, discussions, running code, they decide that the topic is ready for publication, they submit to the ISG, and then if the ISG accepts it, became RC, Internet Standard, for comments. And you can see here, for example, how the documents interrelate, and here you have the reference if there is individual submission, if it's in queue, if it's RC, if it's expired or replaced. So the ITF, which are the use cases, basically, or use internet, and as well, for example, the scenarios that are in the LAN area networks that not necessarily go through internet, but need network connectivity, and or includes all these IoT scenarios. As well, I work in the Champion University, and currently we are working in the CHARM project that deal with IoT and artificial intelligence. And for this project, the specification of the ITF are very useful. So in the ITF, we say that we work with IoT, so the spectrum of IoT working groups in the ITF is very wide and go across all the areas. We can see we have application area working groups, internet area, security area, transport area working groups, routing area, operational management area, and we have as well RTF, that's an Internet Research Task Force that bring with research topics of the ITF, these topics that have long-term research. And then we have the IoT Directorate as well that coordinate the work between all these working groups and try to get connection with other SEOs. So currently I'm chairing our working group and the IoT Directorate as well. So why I want to participate in the ITF and why I encourage to participate in the ITF? First of all, the ITF is open to any interested individual. I think that is great, and that's a great advantage that everyone can make the internet better if they are willing to do it. And the ITF is based on volunteer basis, so I say serve it to the global community, and make the internet better is the goal of the ITF. So I think it's a small grain of sand to improve the world. I mean, the internet is around us, and all our daily activities go through internet. At least mine is all the time remote working, family discussions, TV, buying stuff. If I have smart devices that I want to control as well in my home, so all my activities are touching the internet in some way. So I think it's very important as a technical person. It's kind of my responsibility to make it work better for all of us. And in the ITF, up to the day with the technologies, last technologies, you get to learn on that. So it is a very, very good place to know the last technologies and internet. And as well, you learn diverse set of skills. If you have to chair in a working group, to develop all the leadership skills, and all, since it's a global community, you have intercultural, you develop a lot of intercultural relationship and aspects, and as well, mainly all this technical aspect about the internet, how it works, how the architecture, how this bit means, and you learn a lot. Then how can I participate in the ITF? Well, first, you have to find a working group that interests you, read the chapter, read the available documents. I suggest you to join the mailing list and pick up a document, review it, send your review to the mailing lists and comments. There is as well, the ITF have a program for newcomers, and you can see the links here, and you can see as well how to write internet draft. There are guidelines. So I encourage you to participate. And my takeaways, the ITF is open and interested individual. The ITF developed internet standards to make the internet works better. It's one of the main tasks of the ITF. One of the scenarios of the ITF is the Internet of Things. As well, there are mailing lists that are not necessarily working groups, but they are mailing lists. For example, one mailing list for 6G, and they are a working group as well that work for quantum internet. They're trying to do research how it will be. So they are all the time. And if you have an idea, you can propose. There is as well in every ITF. The ITF meets 3 times in the year, and you can propose ideas. And is provided in the both meetings. And the work in the ITF is performed through mailing lists, so you can subscribe any moment. And if you are in the ITF, you are up to date with the internet technologies. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Well done for that. 2 takeaways, if I may, before passing the floor to our next speaker. We don't have time for the question, but I'd like all speakers to look at some of the questions, because I think the last one could be dedicated to you, Maria. But the takeaway, I'd like to pick up the IETF information you have for newcomers, because that could be useful for us to put in our Standards Academy, Understand ICT. So let's make a note to get that from you. And also, we'd like to also maybe showcase the chart project that you mentioned before. You said it was an R&D project where you're looking at IETF standards, and it would be interesting to understand how that is being actually effective, practically speaking, so we can perhaps showcase that for you too. So just a thought there, where I've made a note, so we'll come back to you on that offline, Mariana. But thank you very much for that presentation. Next up,
thank you very much.
Thank you too. I'd like to pass the floor now to Jackie Taylor. She's the CEO at Flying Binary, and the floor is yours. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you all for being very good on your timing.
Thank you, Savannah. I'm just going to share my screen now. If you can all bear with me, I'm visually disabled, so that is coordinating and orchestrating 5 screens on my end. So I'd appreciate some view that you can see it. And
that's great, Jackie. We can hear and we can see your slides. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So good morning. I'm delighted to be at a dedicated webinar for women in ICT standards. I think, Savannah, is probably the first in the world that you've given us all a stage, and I really think you should make a lot of that. Although I would say a women-only view on this, I'm not sure quite what you've unleashed on the world, but it'll be for good. So thank you for inviting me to present my standards work across the world. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to our company, Flying Binary, and our mission. We use the web science we've pioneered since we started working with Sir Tim Berners-Lee in 2009 to deliver deep tech for a mission of inclusion. And by that, what I mean is leave no one behind in the industrial Internet of Things, which of course has been mentioned a number of times today. So far, the work we've done across the world, over half the world's population has benefited from that work. Yes, I'm here to talk about standards, but sharing knowledge is part of our inclusion mission. I finished book 11 yesterday for the next part of the knowledge share, and the mechanism that's the mechanism we've used. Not just standards, we've done guidance, we've done codes of conduct. And so I want to say that anybody listening to this thinking about, perhaps some of the more detailed standards we all mentioned, there are many facets to the standardization world, but really what it's about is knowledge sharing enablement. And for me, it's about an inclusion agenda. So we're an international web scientist as the co-founders of our company. We also co-founded the data journalism industry. So everything I share with you today has been ruthlessly and rigorously informed by 34 million citizens across the world, because they inform our research. The industrial Internet of Things where we work, though, is an engineering challenge, yes, but it has a societal impact. And that's a very key change in ICT standardization. I'll go on to talk about that and why. But our focus since we founded in 2009 has been Generation Z. Generation Z are between 29 and 19 today, and they influence, as of 2020, almost 40%, over 40% of the economic power across the world. So if you're not currently focused on Generation Z, You do need to be. They're driving our world, and very soon will be the dominant voice. But since my announcement at Davos in 2019, I said we were rolling the agenda. Our work for Gen Z was done. Their movement across the world and their influence was unstoppable. And Gen Alpha is our focus today. They're 18 to 8. They have very different requirements from our connected world, our industrial Internet of Things. However, Gen Beta are already here. So our youngest entrepreneur is 5, and their influence across the world will be much swifter than Gen Z, in my view. Fly Binary is proud to be one of the GovTech 100 companies in the UK. We're recognised for our 27 G-Cloud services for transforming the UK government and its proposition to a cloud-first nation. I'm one of the original G-Cloud Zero team, so yes, in the midst of the battle to actually create that cloud-first policy. But a key thing to say here is we utilised the European Procurement Directive to enable that enablement for our country. And I've accepted a 2-year appointment back in the UK's Cabinet Office, where I originally did that work, where I work in the United Nations now, and I'm not really going to focus on that work today, but I'm actually, over the next 2 years, will bring my United Nations standardization work home. And that will be to actually enable the UK to create the open standards that we need to unlock the next steps for the industrial Internet of Things for our nation. So I'm sure you're wondering what on earth that is. So essentially, I've worked with standards creation my entire career. When I came to, it's the first time I realized that when I came to do the briefing with Trust IT on this, I actually, one of the questions was, how long have you been involved? And I didn't realize, but it was my entire career. Initially as an aerospace engineer, so there's a slightly different technical standards to ICT. And this is the aircraft I helped to design but not develop to solve the noise pollution in our cities. A revolutionary jet engine design, the BAE 146. I still travel in her regularly, or at least I did until a couple of years ago. And I went on from that to be one of the original authors of SSADM, the project management method across the world, and PRINCE, and latterly in the proprietary standards I'll largely talk about today as an independent ministerial advisor in the UK's Cabinet Office. And I oversaw the creation of the first smart city standards via the British Standards Institute. I'm a principal UK expert there. Once you get involved though, it's addictive. So now I'm a technical author of 3 smart city standards in the UK, 3 international ones, soon to be 4. And I don't just work in smart cities. I'm a principal expert for data, energy and artificial intelligence. I'm working in the EU as a chair of the smart cities, a vice chair of one of the smart city standards and standardization pieces. And we're internationally creating the standards that we at Flying Binary need to deliver our inclusion mission beyond the half of the world that we've positively currently impacted. So this is one of them. I wanted to talk about specifics really today. This is the world's first data sharing standard. And as technical author, it's been adopted across the world as we move the agenda that the UK pioneered for open data onto a shared data agenda. And smart cities is the first sector from our national security point of view that has been enabled for this. However, the first nation to adopt this standard, this UK standard, was Russia, and the first city was Dubai. That's an entirely other story. But I've created standards, another standard which has been built out of this collateral to address the energy issues for Asia Pac as a nation-based response to the Fukushima accident and the move from nuclear. And just last week, I spoke to an 8 million strong audience and shared some of the elements of this standard across Asia Pac about the next steps that we're delivering for net zero as part of the G7 initiative. And also I brought in at that point the infrastructure standard that I've created at an international level from this material, because 60% of the carbon creation across the world is by our smart cities. So this has been foundational to actually be an enablement for many sectors. And I think that's one thing I do want to say. When you get involved in this sort of work, because it's a connected world we're already delivering, then it actually allows you to move into other arenas. I'm a wholesale market specialist in energy, and it gave me a chance to work with with colleagues in Asia Pac to look at what a post-nuclear world looked like. And it's also been used to create a data sharing agenda across ISO IEC JTC1. And I want to thank you to the Stand ICT for that, because they sponsored me as a fellow to actually understand how we could enable that across the whole technology agenda. And we are now creating the new international standard on data uses, and we have in JTC1 a dedicated group of experts that look at data usage, which of course is our enabler for the industrial Internet of Things. This one, just again, another example, it came originally before that standard I just showed you, but we were looking in the UK about how we might use technology to change the education outcomes for our pupils in England between the ages of 5 and 18. We actually did some additional work to look at prenatal conditions in order to get the setting for our young people as they enter school at 5. And citizen communities on this platform, they use the outcomes that this data platform, the shared data platform, is not only to compare outcomes based on geography. That's a very easy thing, lots of people do that, but on pupil cohorts. I mentioned the importance of Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, and demographics. And the national statistics are also produced from this data, a reuse, so that we're across England talking about a single point of reference. It's a regulatory platform as well. It's used by schools, it's used by the government, it's used by journalists like myself to understand the landscape and to enable future innovation. And as the European Commission's fast starter, who holds the pen for 450 million citizens, we've used this standardization work to articulate the policy landscape for the data and understanding what the funding calls might need to build from an EU capability point of view in shared data. So some of the things that you were mentioning before, Silvana, about future calls, that has been done using this supply and demand model and shared data. And effectively that demand side perspective also gave rise to a European Commission report, which has been fed into the ICT standardization plan on behalf of Europe's citizens. 80 million of us across Europe have accessibility needs, and we're not normally included in any technology innovations. And so as Vice Chair of CC 465, we're developing those standards from the ICT rolling plan to meet the citizen requirements for smart cities. I've worked with the EU high-level expert group, again, to create guidelines. It doesn't always start with standards. Standards are where we're looking at, beyond building capability, we're looking at capacity. But when we have an emerging market such as AI, it's important to create a landscape view of the issues, which isn't always a standard. Blind Binary is selected for one of 50 companies who could test the proposed AI high-level experts groups guidelines against an existing service. And we have a large international team that's mentioned before, ISO IEC JTC1 SC42, who are creating the AI standards at global industry level. And very interestingly, when we formed that agenda in JTC1, there has been such a deep collaboration across the world on that. And now the EU is obviously, as has been mentioned earlier, we're starting to look at what else might need to be created as the EU creates the AI Act.
Jackie, have you got a minute left?
Yeah, I'm on penultimate slide. So we've taken this international AI standards work, and we've, in partnership with the UK's Information Commissioner, in a regulatory sandbox, because we need to demonstrate how AI technology and the deep tech that can be built with it needs a different set of methods. And again, that will become a standard, I expect, but possibly not in this arena, to deliver AI services. We're utilising the age-appropriate design code for the UK GDPR component to deliver inclusive technology services for our most vulnerable in society. Any technical standards that's not using the AADC, the children's code as it's known, is likely developing the wrong technology. And we've effectively looking at this for young people as young as 6 at risk of self-harm or suicide, and having additional harm created by online social contact. So again, this is a code of practice, it's not always standard. And then my final slide, Final note from me on the industrial Internet of Things, it's not just a technology change, it's societal. IIT is radically changing international technology standardization, and I'm the convener in JCT1 of a new approach to this called cross-domain collaboration. And we formed that on a principle-based new agenda for technology. And why did I get into standards? People ask me that a lot. Well, initially because a UK Cabinet Office Minister asked me to. Why did I stay? Because my inclusion focus is not an industry focus. And as a female visually disabled technology, my voice and the voice of SMEs is missing across the standardization program. And we should not sleepwalk our way into the industrial Internet of Things. And standards is one way to address that. That's me finished. I'll take questions however you need me to.
Thank you, Jackie. Very nice concluding statements there. And in fact, if there are any documents that we don't have that you did quote, Jackie, on our publications area on our website, please do send them along and we'll get them up there for you. Okay, that's super. Thank you very much for that, Jackie. Moving on to our next speaker, then we have Mariana Marikova. Thank you, Mariana. You put your slide already, and I'll pass the floor immediately to you. Thank you, Mariana.
Thank you, Silvana, and what an honor and pleasure to be here today during the inaugural webinar among so many great speakers. I have to say, from my personal story, when I attend engineering meetings, I'm usually the only female or in minority, so it is great to see so many females here today. Thank you, Silvana, for hosting us. Today I will be wearing several hats. As it's written on my first slide, I was asked on behalf of the Women in Standards to present on who we are and what we do. And I will also sneak in a few words on Women at IC, what I do in my day-to-day job as a technical officer, and also promote the work we do in the International Gender Champions Network. So I will try to make it clear and make the separation. Next slide, please. First, I will start with Women in Standards. It is an organization focused on promoting the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, both in the consensus bodies that create standards and in how standardization is written. Diversity, equity, inclusion must be considered every day in order to create real change. It cannot simply be a policy. Women in Standards had humble beginnings. The organization was born through women working in standardization in Washington, D.C., United States area, who found that networking was path to helping each other navigate standards development. I can recall, I believe it was in 2004 when we initially, 2004 when we initially launched, and we had about 15 members to start with. But the networking movement began to grow across many different standards developing organizations. Individually, many of these women were also creating international networks of women in standardization development. By sharing experiences with each other, we recognized that our voices were missing, where we could help lift each other up. Our association may seem focused on women, but in fact, we welcome all to join. Anyone is welcome. The vision is to be a premier organization focused on elevating and educating the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and gender responsiveness in the development of standards and in the standardization profession. Our mission is to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in standards and standards development. However, these are not without challenges. Next slide, please. The challenges faced in addressing diversity and inclusiveness across genders, cultures, race, religion, and other aspects are well known in standards. The most obvious is the difference in genders. Within the United States, and I'm speaking on behalf of the US because that's where women in standards are based, the most recent census survey determined that women are making gains in STEM occupations, including an 8% rise in the recent census. Women as a whole, however, only make up to 27% of STEM jobs, which we all know to be science, technology, engineering, and math. We also know STEM is to be foundational in developing standardization. These challenges go beyond STEM basics on an international level. Certain cultures have differences in business styles, which are important to understand and can be factors in reaching consensus in international standardization bodies. Understanding cultural differences and how they can impact consensus is also a challenge and must be considered in creating standards. Diversity, equity, and inclusion must be global. So what can we do about it? Let's go to the next slide, please. What we've learned through networking is that we are our best allies. By working together and raising awareness, we can influence change. Within Women in Standards, we believe that working with standards developing organizations and individuals will bring visibility to the importance of diversity and inclusion, opportunities to improve, and opportunities to educate and incorporate the next generation of standardization of professionals, and so forth. We believe in our community. We believe that engaging with our stakeholders at all levels, including students and universities, standards developing organizations, consultants, engineers, associations, and others, starts the conversation, talking about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion across such areas as race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, culture, can create awareness and influence change. We believe in power of support. Learning from each other is the key. Going back to our early days, the simple act of gathering as a network grew into support, learning, and growth. Today, we hold webinars, workshops, panels, and forums. We hope to continue this and to continue to learn from each other. We hope that you will consider joining us, following and sharing our posts on social media, attending and presenting at our events, and to help us spread the word. We need your help. Every voice makes a difference. You will notice as the slides will be shared that as I'm presenting on different organizations, the links are actually clickable, so you can view the Women in Standards. We also have, as I mentioned, social media groups, LinkedIn, so please do join. The next slide, please. Now I will switch into my day job at IEC, which is the International Electrotechnical Commission, where I serve as a technical officer to over 20 technical committees, advisory committees, systems committees. IEC, or as I mentioned, International Electrotechnical Commission, is an organization which oversees global standards development in electrotechnology. And the story of Women at IEC, which I'm also part of, it was a small group of women at IEC staff from various departments that made late in 2020 for a brainstorming session to discuss how we can best promote diversity, and especially women in standardization. We had several questions. Should we focus on women within IEC campaign? Why is such a campaign needed? And what would it look like? The outcome of the brainstorming was to move on with a campaign to promote diversity and to start with gender equality. There were several reasons why. One was the report from Standards Council of Canada. It's a collection of data from over 100 countries and highlights that standards fail to protect women as much as men, leading to a greater number of fatalities among women. For example, research shows that the risk of being injured or killed in a car accident is 73% higher for women because crash test dummies are based on male arthrometry. Women are not small men, and the assumption that they are has led to many preventable accidents. We at IEC found this report quite concerning. We understand women are underrepresented in our governing bodies and community. By signing the diversity statement, IEC recognized that diversity adds value by fostering creativity and offering a range of perspectives and ideas. IEC decided to place particular focus on stakeholder, gender, and geographical diversity. Then in May of 2019, IEC signed Gender Responsive Standards Declaration. At the time, IEC committed to create and proactively implement a gender action plan for the organization and to track progress, collect and share data, success stories, and good practices. We also created diversity task group within our council board. Next slide, please. Now you're going to see a beautiful picture of our women, female contributors. I'll share a summary overview of our actual campaign, Women at IEC. The aim of the Women at IEC campaign, as we discussed within our small group, is to empower women within IEC and to encourage more women to join the organization. We ask our female contributors to share a 1-minute video to outline the work of IEC and, the most importantly, how each one of them, of us, make a difference through our involvement and contributions to IEC. We received over 50 videos from all around the world, from Europe, Middle East, Americas, Australia, Africa, and Asia, showing what extent the IC is a fully global organization. As far as social media reach, the numbers were truly exciting. The reach was over 1.7 million, engagement 29,000, organic impression over 645,000, and video views over 64,000. IC is continually looking for women to highlight. If you know of any exceptional woman that we could highlight in our community, please let us know at women@ic.ch. I will also share that in chat. And join us in promoting each other. While I wanted to share a video of one of the women contributors with you today, for the lack of time, I cannot do it, but please do take your time to see one of the videos or all of them. I promise they are encouraging and unique to each of the contributors to share their story. I personally very much enjoy them and learned a lot from women that are contributing into IC work. And my last slide, please. The last aspect of IEC and what we do on a global level is the International Gender Champions Network. It is a network of over 283 champions and 260 alumni, which brings together decision makers to break down gender barriers. In 2020, our own General Secretary and CEO, Mr. Philip Metzger, committed to become a member of the International Gender Champions Network. And on this slide, you can see the commitments he made. He did make a personal commitment to implement internal mechanisms and rules to support inclusive, enabling, and flexible working environment free of discrimination. We did launch a training staff program. And the second one was conduct a gender-based survey of remuneration of the IEC staff as regards work of equal value by June 2022 and communicate the findings within the organization by June 2023. That will conclude my presentation. I will be sharing the URL for the videos. So thank you so much for asking that question.
Thank you, Mariana. I see lots. That was a very nice presentation too. They all are wonderful. I've seen some movement in the chat. In fact, people are asking if you can share those 1-minute videos. So that would be wonderful. I'm going to go swiftly on for time and introduce our final speaker to today's very interesting webinar. I'm so pleased we managed to do this and can't wait for the next editions. Suno Wood, we had the pleasure of meeting face to face. It's a long memory ago. I feel like crying. Back in Brussels, who is the chair of ECTC and eHealth. So Suno, lovely to have you with us, and I'm going to pass you the floor. Thank you. Suno, you're mute. Okay, we can hear you now.
Have you got, yes. Okay, yes, back in Brussels, I still have the T-shirt. I'm proud.
Jackie has them too. Actually, we can all worn them now. I forgot to say that.
That's true. Anyway, I gather there's not much time, but that's just as well, because when the previous speaker got to the point of, please don't be paralyzed, I think I suddenly thought I might be. You know, I understand, and this says something in itself. I understood the topic in a completely different way to most of the speakers. It's been, I mean, we all know that there aren't women around when you go to any sort of major meeting or discussion group about women in standards. Well, where are they? You know, you haven't got my slides, have you? Have you?
We're not seeing them. Do you want to? No, sorry. Can we mute? I think. Did you send them to us?
Yes.
Right. Hang on a second, Francesca. If you could mute.
Yeah.
And we're showing them now. Okay. Great. They're there now, Suno. Over to you. Perfect.
All right. How do you haven't got them, have you? Or you have? Oh, all right.
Yes, we're seeing them, Suno, and we can change them.
Okay. Okay. Well, when you pose a question like this, women in standards, and you don't see any around you, or really very, very few indeed, you have to ask yourself, is this actually a critical? Well, it is a critical comment But at the same time, it's not meant in a critical way, in the sense that there are no women because they're all men. The first speakers were so amazingly qualified and such detail. They've done such amazing detailed work that I realized there were very few, but there were a couple who are putting the general view, looking at what is actually going on and who these women are is fascinating. But they have had to be so strong. So then I thought, well, I don't want to criticize anybody here, because I have to admit that my colleagues who are men are the most helpful. They're the kindest. They've been amazing to work with. I should add, to those who don't know me, I'm the chair of eHealth at Etsy. And so I was placed in a position of not wanting to criticize and feeling extremely critical of what's going on. And very keen to join in the debate of how we can make things easier for women to make real careers in standards. One thing I do notice is that everyone in this field, it just gets on with their own little niche. Don't seem to be, as it were, big jobs for women in this area, but there are a lot of women who are actually keen to make their voice much better heard. And as I say, our contribution is valued, even though there are few of us. Sorry, next one. So, and at the same time, women, although they're few, our contribution, combined with the time pressure that is all around us, pushing us all the time, for many of us, our job is to aim and bring information and listen to others, to make teams, informal and uninformed, and to bring everybody together. It has been shown at various times that men and women actually are more creative when we all work together. We're certainly not in a competitive situation. Next one, please. Okay, so are there any particular qualities that women need to keep afloat, as it were, in this masculine world? Mainly, the most important thing is just persevere, keep going, and develop your own knowledge in a particular technical expertise. And then I said, well, is that any different to what a man does? It is actually exactly what men do, but the woman doing it will probably have to fight more to get there and to keep going. Next one, please. This, I was amazed to find, it was still one of the best quotations I could to describe our work. The representation of the world, like the world itself, is the work of men. They describe it from their own point of view, which they confuse with the absolute truth. And that was Simone de Beauvoir in 1949, a long time ago, but nothing has changed. Because what we find is that, and in this respect, I consider to be the view of standards, is one that actually shapes the world. How we see it is how we make it. We constantly change what we want to have and what we want to make into, as it were, our own standard, where it is confused completely with what is actually real. That's a bit tortuous, but this is one of the reasons why so many women end up like I did, like many of these speakers, have actually created their own way of working, their own view of what should happen by running their own companies and by sharing their own knowledge in either a small company way or an individual way, or what we don't find is the magical area where everything comes together. Next one, please. But this is rather a call to arms. If you wish to influence, you must take part. The knowledgeable world is incomplete if seen from any one point of view at once, and empty if seen just from one. And again, this is why women are very good actually at doing this kind of exercise and enjoy it too. I mean, what a very nice moment that was when we opened this meeting and everybody started talking at once. There was nobody sitting at the back of the room thinking about it. Everybody wanted to share some of the information that's been going around. And I've no doubt at all that the airlines are going to be very busy when this is over. It has been very, very successful, I think. And how nice too that something so successful is also such a pleasure to take part in. Next one. So, well, I have dithered and dithered, do I dare say this? Because this is a genuine quotation and it's much too rude for a polite story like this. But there's a Spanish writer who has been fighting against data bias in AI, which is a deeply serious and sad story in some ways. She is a fighter, but she said, what is the advice to us all who've been interested in this problem is for the woman who persists, keep on being bloody difficult. It's never an easy path, and particularly where you are really, really challenging what is already a problem and is getting worse of data bias in a world designed for men. How do you expose that while still working with them? It's not easy. So this fight needs the support of women who create standards themselves to actually to carry it further. And I repeat this at the end, but for anyone who wonders, I have been chair at CE Health for 8 years and have always been treated with kindness. And my comments concern our society in general, not just ISTOs. And so many thanks to Stand ICT and ETSI. And I think that that's my time, I think.
So, that wonderful, wonderful final speech, really. In fact, you nearly brought tears to my eyes. What I'd like to thank you. I'd like everyone, if you don't mind, to put their cameras back on, if you may, and I'd like to see you and look at you in the eyes to thank you profoundly for your efforts, for your contributions, for your support, for your presentation, for your enthusiasm and for your energy. Really, I'd like to clearly thank the consortium partners as well, DCU and Australo, together with my colleagues at Trust IT, who have been great in pushing this through, Francesco, Filomena, Maria, Patricia, and I'd like to thank our project officer, Thomas Reiben, and Emilio, who are always so great in supporting us in everything we're doing on Stand ICT, and we just hope to grow and get bigger and better and really try to make a small dent. And this is a little one. What we'll do is put together a post-event report, a short one, so we can take some major findings. And I do hope that we can get to meet in person very soon. And so if a picture has been taken, if you just want to do something, and we'll post a final one. So well done, thank you. Great smile of these beautiful, very skilled ladies. Really, thank you so much. You've made my day. You really have. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful lunch, all of you. And to the next edition, thank you. Take care and bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks all. Great to meet you.
And
And
nice to meet you all.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.